Welcome in, LSU fans, as we embark on the close to the month of February. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Glen West. Glen, the snow is officially gone, although I don't know if you saw the news. There apparently is going to be another Arctic blast that comes in like right before Valentine's Day. They don't know if it's going to see true snow, but they are thinking some ice, which would be hilarious because today we're talking about baseball. All right. And it would be hilarious if Purdue Fort Wayne left just the god awful weather in the north this time of year to come down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana and play baseball and have to maybe see some snow. Like that would be a little bit comical, ironic. But hey, baseball season's right around the corner, Glenn. And man, what a loaded Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And obviously, if you're watching us on Monday, there's a scrimmage on Monday afternoon as well of baseball content, Glenn. And Jay Johnson does not mince words when he talks to the media. A great media session. Several players spoke. So, Glenn, we're going to talk a little bit about it, man, but wanted to kind of open up. What was the mood on Friday as you, along with a lot of media, kind of gears up for one of the I think one of the more intriguing seasons in LSU baseball. A lot of unknown but excitement, coming into this year.
Yeah, it's always that kind of point that I look at, and when the schedule kind of flips over to baseball is when they have media days for baseball, and that we're able to really kind of dive in about this 2025 team and get to learn a little bit more about what Coach Johnson's thinking going into the season, what some of these players, these veteran players, are thinking going into the year, and it's just a really great opportunity, I think, to kind of get a good kind of sense of what they feel like they are going to be this year. And I think from everything that we talked, everything that we heard, I think probably one of the biggest kind of overarching takeaways I have is that this is not a young team, but it's a new team, and they're going to have to really integrate a lot of pieces into this thing over the first several weeks of the season. Like I think non-conference play, you're going to see a lot of rotations. You're going to see a lot of different lineups, a lot of different pitching combinations that they want to go with to kind of really find that core group of guys maybe they want to lean into for SEC play. So this is going to be very much an open competition in a lot of key spots. We'll get into all that as we kind of move on throughout the pod. But I'm super excited about this team. I think from a pure depth perspective, and I know we come into every year thinking that LSU has great depth, and it just doesn't always play out that way. The 2023 season, of course, it was a great team with great depth, but even last year, I think we thought going into the year, this was a team with a lot of really solid players. But this year, this is a lot of really talented arms, a lot of really talented position players that are going to be mixing and matching. And I think a lot of this is going to be personnel based on terms of how they want to kind of operate on an opponent to opponent basis. And there's a lot of guys that, I mean, just as one example, Jay Johnson gave us 8 names in the outfield that he feels like they could put in and there wouldn't be a huge drop off from a player to player perspective. So that's the kind of competition we're talking about here over the next several weeks. Whoever gets that opening day start probably isn't going to be some of them probably won't be in the lineup the next day because there's going to be a bunch of guys that LSU wants to try to get involved in this thing. So very excited. And from that perspective, and I know that you were out there on Saturday watching a little bit of the scrimmage out there. Was wondering if you can maybe give me some of your overarching thoughts on kind of the scrimmage and what you were able to see. And we can kind of just jump off from there.
Yeah, no, and I think, if you're like a real baseball sicko, like me, in the sense of like Glenn, I mean, ever since I can remember, I'm the guy that watches like spring training games. The games where you have guys on the that are not going to make the roster, no name on the back of the jersey. They're number 97. They're going to play in single A. And that's kind of what I felt like. Not just the scrimmages are, but you mentioned it, a lot of what the non-conference portion is going to be like. So many interchangeable pieces. Gavin Guidry mentioned on the pitching side of things, but versatility. And just you have a lot of guys that can do a lot of different things. I kind of start off with a couple of things that stood out to me, and we talk about the outfield. I mean, Chris Stanfield, not just a great day on Saturday, but all reports coming out that he had a great day on Sunday as well. And this is a guy that transferred in from Auburn. You knew that he had a good glove. I remember being up and watching him the past 2 years in person, Glenn. I mean, has a good glove, really good speed, knows how to run the bases very well, which is more important than I think people understand. And the biggest question was the bat. And a lot of people equated that to like, could they do what they did with Michael Braswell, last year? It feels like a very similar candidate in the sense of, hey, he's a toolsy player, but is the bat going to be developed enough at LSU? And I mean, man, he hit a home run off of William Schmidt, which, like, I know, that's a 4-year player hitting a home run off of a true freshman. But, Schmidt's got some stuff that plays at this level. There's a reason that he was really sought after not only by LSU, but in the draft as well. But, Chris Stanfield, if it's a guy that feels like, if he hits, it's going to be really hard to keep him with his level of experience playing in the SEC already to keep him out of the lineup. That was one thing that stood out to me. And then you go in the pitching, and I mentioned Guidry, Saturday's kind of starters for those games. We got to say Gavin Guidry out there, on the mound. The breaking ball wasn't, I think, as sharp as he wanted it. And I don't know about you, Glenn. To me, that's been something, reading some of the reports from our people over on Go 24/7, and shout out to those folks that have kind of taken it upon themselves to give us little scouting reports and play-by-plays throughout the weekend. Pitching is going to take a second to get there. Like, in terms of like guys feeling more comfortable with the breaking ball, you could see that Chase Shores. You can see why people are excited about him, and is having some conversation with some fans around it, and they're like, "Golly, like, could you have imagined if this guy could have stayed healthy and you could have thrown him and Paul Skeens out there in the same rotation on a weekend or something like that during that 2023 season, which would have been nuts."
Or
But
even last year with Holman and
last
Jump,
year, yeah.
what a trio that would have been. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So watch Shores a little bit. The fastball's obviously there. That's what he's going to play off of. The breaking ball was a little flat at times, but then you kind of got a little more bend in the breaking ball, and guys were really kind of mesmerized by that. So you got to see a little bit of Stephen Milam at third base. Luis Hernandez played a little bit of first base in that scrimmage on Saturday as they kind of figure out that catching position. So I think just the biggest thing, and then obviously wasn't able to be there on Friday, but just seeing and listening and watching the press conferences, watching and you guys ask the questions, versatility is just something that I think that this team is going to have, where you really, if you're Jay Johnson, and Kate Anderson said this on the podcast last week, he said it's going to be hard for Coach Johnson to really, nail down like what he wants to do, because, and he said, if Coach Johnson, I know fans know it as well, you're probably throughout, at least through non-conference play, Glenn, you could have for those weekend series, a different lineup Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just to find the best combination, and not just like guys in the different parts of the order, but just different players, as they kind of get there. Pearson's little brother played some third base, and the kid's got a pretty nice glove over there. So I'm excited to see, like, how much does he even really play? We'll see, but obviously was a highly touted guy, well thought of. And he's got the hair already of an upperclassman flowing there through the back of the cap. So I don't know, Glenn. I think versatility for me is like the biggest thing, and you could take it anywhere. You could go pitching, which I think is, you see so many guys in interchangeable spots, guys willing to be stretched out to starters, guys understanding maybe I have that middle relief role during non-conference season that gets a spot start in the midweek, but I could be a Sunday starter. And I think well, we can start with that. Just the versatility in pitching that Gavin Guidry talked about. Man, you really have, I don't know if you have like that bona fide guy right now that you're like, okay, that's your number one, but you've got a lot of guys that could be that number one for you. And it just kind of feels like, hey, just let them compete and see what happens.
Yeah, I think Kate Anderson kind of summed it up best when he was talking with the media as well. When he said, we have potentially 3 different rotations that could all win us a championship. Like, he believes that, like, and it kind of backs it up, considering there are going to be 8 different guys that LSU stretches out here over the next several weeks to really kind of hone down and kind of make into those starter roles.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that there's going to be a lot of, certainly a lot of competition here. But for me, I think it's more interesting to kind of peel it back a little bit more and say, all right, who are some of the guys that maybe, could be in that starting position, but maybe don't get the opening nod on the opening weekend, but could still be kind of deep relief kind of pitchers for you. And to me, I kind of asked this to Jay on the in his press conference, like, is there anybody they're looking at to be kind of in that Griffin Herring role last year, like
Yeah.
a guy that could eat up a bunch of innings in a game where maybe the starter doesn't go but 3 or 4, and you have a chance to win a series or tie a series or jump out to an early 1-0 lead in a series. Is there anybody out there like that they're looking at? And he essentially said, the guys that maybe aren't starting, that there's going to be 2 or 3 that we hope can kind of be in kind of be thrust into that Griffin Herring role, and are guys that maybe don't get to have their name on the starting card for as an example, but could eat up 4 or 5 innings for us and still be considered a starter on a certain day where maybe one of the pitchers doesn't have it going or something like that. So that to me, I thought was really an interesting answer, because when you look at it, there's a lot of talent they're going to be looking at. I mean, whether it's Anderson, Chase Shores, Anthony Ianson, Zach Cohen, Kason Evans, William Schmidt. Those are just some of the names they're going to be trotting out there. Guidry, of course, and I know I'm missing one. Oh, Connor Ware was the other one. So like, that's 8 names right there that LSU is going to have to really cipher through here over the next several weeks. I mean, it really feels like these guys are all going to have to bring their A games in these scrimmages to kind of make this a very difficult decision for Jay. And, I think that is a position you want to be in, though, right? I mean, you want to have an overabundance of talent, rather than, not having enough and not having enough impact pitchers. And I don't think LSU is going to have that problem. So, for me, what I'm looking at from a pitcher perspective is, all right, how consistent are they? Are they throwing strikes? Are they hitting every corner of the strike zone? Are they making it difficult on these offensive players for LSU? And I think that there's a lot that goes into it, and certainly it'll be a lot of Nate Yeski will have a certain say on what they look at. But for me, I think it's also going to be a lot of matchup based stuff. Like I do kind of see this thing going like, all right, which pitcher gives us the best chance against this lineup on this day, kind of thing. I think that's just how Jay operates. That's how he's always kind of thought about things. And when you have Paul Skeens, that's just an easy name to write in there on Fridays. So we'll see kind of who kind of takes over those jobs. But we've written our prediction pieces kind of coming into the spring, and you probably could already put a bunch of scratches in there and kind of in terms of what that opening day lineup could look like. Like I thought it could be Chase Shores in that opening day lineup, just because I think there's a lot of trust and ability that Shores has, but I think Cade Anderson could be that guy. I think Connor Ware could be that guy. I think what Gavin Guidry has shown you, he could be a guy like that. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they divide up this pitching staff, and which arms are extended to be starters, which ones maybe they peel back a little bit and allow those guys to be closers. And then there's a whole nother bucket of pitchers that we didn't even talk about that are also going to be part of this rotation and going to be eating up relief innings and setting guys up to close games. So lots to unpack there over the next several weeks, and it's a good position for LSU to be in, though.
Yeah. Glenn, let's talk a little bit about, the guys that are going to catch him, because I think that's something that, and I'm in the middle of writing a piece on this right now with Jay's comments and then some of my thoughts on each of the guys. I think that last year you got into this spot where the catcher position wasn't really nailed down, and then all of a sudden it was just Alex Milazzo every day. Like, it was just like, hey, they're running Milazzo out there every day. You obviously have Hayden, you've got Brady as well. This year feels like just a fun competition to watch. And like, I'm going to be watching that throughout, just the scrimmage season, throughout obviously the early portion of the non-conference. And then when they get into some of those higher level, non-conference game, Dallas Baptist later in February. And then obviously when they go play out in Frisco as well, when you start playing that higher level competition, does Jay start to, I don't want to say favor, but does he find a guy that he feels comfortable with behind the plate? Cade Anderson mentioned in last week's podcast, he said, all of our guys, and we were joking about Daniel Dickinson, he said all of our guys, like, they can hold base runners pretty well. Like, he didn't feel like there was a massive deficiency with that ability to do that. So what do you like about all of these catching options? I mean, I know we've got several guys we could talk about, but just Jay went in and got guys that it said, okay, we got to overhaul this position a little bit because you're losing two veterans. Brady Neal transfers to Alabama. You've got different options and weapons you can go look at, and I feel like they all do a little bit of different things. And hey, it's going to create a fun little storyline to monitor here over the next month or so.
Yeah, I think they're all really talented, and I do think this kind of comes down to, again, matchup based. Like
Yeah.
if it's going to be a lefty pitcher they're facing, well, you're going to want to play probably one of your righty catchers, and if it's going to be a righty pitcher you're facing, there could be some opportunity there for a lefty to get in and get some at bats. So I think for me, what it comes down to, at least from what I've seen and what I've heard, and just talking with folks, like I think the offense is going to be there with this catcher group. Like I think Luis
Mm-hmm.
Hernandez and Kate Beatty are going to be very capable offensive players. Blaze Priester as well. I think it's going to come down to the defense, and there have been some moments. I think even going back to the fall where they've let some balls get by them. They've struggled. They've struggled a little bit in
Mm-hmm.
terms of just kind of getting that consistency down behind the plate from a defensive perspective. And so that to me is going to be kind of the tell-all of who kind of maybe gets the nod there, at least to start the season. And I do think that all three of those guys though are going to have opportunities. Like you look at the baseball data Twitter page every day, every scrimmage, it's Kate Beatty has a 106.4 mile per hour, off the bat speed on one
Yeah.
of his hits. I mean, it's crazy how consistent he was, even going back to the fall where he was, I think, number 2 or number 3 on the entire roster in
Mm-hmm.
batting average, and he had the most doubles. He was very consistent from an offensive perspective. But you could tell there were some things he needed to work through defensively, and becoming the defensive catcher that LSU is going to need him to be. And that's stuff that just takes time. Like I
Yeah.
think that he's going to get there. And Hernandez certainly didn't even play catcher last year. He was mostly a DH in Indiana State, but they've been very impressed by his ability to pick the position up after having a year kind of off of it. So I think those two are probably the leans for me in terms of guys that they kind of recycle or go between, at least to start the year. But certainly Bryce Priester will have some opportunity, and on days that Hernandez doesn't catch, I could certainly see him being a DH. I think they're going to want his bat in there. And it's just kind of creates a ripple effect, right? Because I mean,
Yeah.
whoever you're playing at catcher, it could have a ripple effect on the DH. It could have a ripple effect on what you want to do in the outfield, because there's some really talented players in the outfield that also could DH for you, that could not, and that maybe won't enter the lineup or won't be in a starting lineup on a certain day. So I think for me, the end of the day, what they really like to do, and what Jay has been consistent with over his tenure here, they really like to have some balance between the righty and the lefty hitters. And I think they're going to
Mm-hmm.
get a lot closer to that this year than they were maybe a year ago. You're going to see a lot of different times where there's 5 lefties and 4 righties, 4 righties, 5 lefties. I mean, there's 5 righties, 4 lefties. Like there's going to be a lot of interchangeability, I think, in this lineup because of what they're able to do with their different positions that are up for grabs, and kind of not the level of drop off maybe that they're expecting as compared to maybe past years at some of these spots.
Yeah, and I think too, one thing that we've seen, and you go back to last year, is that, and Jay said this to kind of open up the question you asked about the catchers, is you got to play a winning brand of baseball in in the SEC, and especially that's the expectation at LSU. And Glenn, it starts with that position. Look, I mean, I played it for a year and a half in college at a way smaller level, but you have to be a good defensive option. Like that has to be the priority at that position. So yeah, there's a lot of guys with some offensive upside that you want to keep those bats in the lineup, but catcher's that one spot, and there's other spots on the defensive side of the ball as well. But in the field where you can negate your team's success with bad defensive play pretty effectively if you don't play well there. And I think that's why we saw Jay go with Alex Milazzo, because that was kind of the sure hand behind the plate. So it'll be interesting to see how long it takes for Johnson and this staff to kind of find that guy. But I guarantee you, one of the big qualities is he's going to call a good game. He's going to make the pitchers have a comfortable relationship, and then also he's just you're not going to talk about him a lot because he's just doing his job. That's one of those positions, kind of like, left guard. Like if we're not talking to you a lot about you, I should say, then you're playing pretty well. And we don't have to worry about it. It's one of those spots.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Milazzo and Travinsky and Brady Neal to an extent, they all split time last year at
Yeah.
various points. Like, there's going to be enough opportunities for all these guys to get opportunity to show the coaching staff that they should be in the everyday lineup or should be a part of that rotation very consistently. So it's just going to be one of the many positions I think that we look at that's not going to be settled until conference play. And I think that's really the main message here is that it's going to take some time. Like, I think they're going to win a lot of games in the process of trying to figure out who their core is going to be, but we might not know their core until 3 or 4 weeks into the year, which I think is fine. And I think it tells you that they have a lot of options that they want to run through and make sure that they're making the right decisions. So we'll certainly be interesting to see kind of the different combinations they come up with and just kind of how those players kind of react to being thrown into different positions and being thrown into different spots in the order, for example, with the bat. And I'm endlessly curious about kind of what they roll out there on a Friday as opposed to a Sunday or a Saturday or a midweek. So there's going to be a lot of that going on.
Let's take it out to the field a little bit here. And I think I want to start with one of the big things that Jay talked about is that you got the feeling, and he kind of said it as well, that, look, I mean, Stephen Milam might be their best defender on the infield and his consistency, what he able to do. They're going to move him to the left side of second base and maybe put him a little bit of short, a little bit of third at times. You obviously have Michael Braswell still. You've got Daniel Dickinson, that is a speedster that can fill the second base position. First base feels like it's pretty much Jared Jones, and that's pretty much that cemented status. But you obviously got to have a guy that can play there in a pinch. Give me your thoughts on this infield, how it shakes out with a lot of different options, and how Milam kind of feels like that's the that's the plug and play piece. Like where you put him, it determines where everyone else falls in line.
Yeah, I don't know that my thoughts have changed a whole ton on this since since the press conference and since we've gotten to see a couple scrimmages. I mean, they've had Milam at third base some, they've had Braswell at third base some, and another kind of guy to maybe keep some tabs on is Tanner Reeves. He's done a really nice job, kind of in the infield as well. But I would probably lean this more towards you're going to have Jones at first, you're going to have Dickinson at second. You're going to have Milam at short, and then Braswell is going to be your starting third baseman, I think, to start the year. Like I really like what that lineup can do defensively. It's got enough offense in it, of course, but if Milam is that guy, and everything that we've heard and everything that Jay Johnson has said is that he's going to be that guy for them, I would expect him to be the shortstop, the everyday shortstop, because that's going to be the guy that's going to get the ball hit at him the most. And I would imagine also when they're facing lefties that are pull hit lefties, they probably do some switcheroo where they have Milam at second, and they kind of shift and kind of put their best defender in the best spot to where the ball could go. So I think that's kind of your core infield right now. I would like I said, I think Tanner Reeves is a guy to maybe monitor and keep an eye on, as a guy that could get some opportunities early in the season and see what he does.
Yeah.
You mentioned John Pearson there at third base. Maybe John Pearson gets a spot start here and shows the coaching staff something as well. Like I think there's a lot of different ways this can go at all levels of the field. And so I think first base and second base are pretty much solidified. I think, depending on how Braswell plays at third, that could maybe be the only conversation to have. But I also do think that Braswell showed you last year that he was an extremely valuable player over the last 20 to 25 games of the year. His errors were way down. He was he went on an absolute tear at the plate. I think he was hitting above 320 or 330 at the plate for the last 15 or 16 games, and was really a consistent bat for you. So I think it's going to be very tough to take any of those four off the field, but there's going to be some interesting decisions that are made if there is some struggles there along the way.
It's going to be interesting to see, defense is such a once again such a big thing that I think Jay Johnson and this team, they want to be a little bit maybe better at in 2025. And Milam just feels like at times like a vacuum. Like anything that's within a decent radius of him, he's going to make the play and make it look routine. Braswell wants to take the next step as a defender. I know, at times struggled, had a really just a nightmarish type of, time period last year where he just really was, just
And he
either in
talks
his
about
own
that.
head.
It was just in his
Yeah,
head. He talks
yeah,
about it a little bit in the press conference where there was a couple week stretch there where he was committing a bunch of errors. LSU was losing a lot of series, and he was not in a great mental headspace. He told us that, and he was able to kind of fight through it and get on the other end of it and have a really nice finish to the season. Sorry, I didn't mean
yeah.
to cut you off there.
No, that's where I was going with that. I mean, that it's
Yeah.
one of those things where you feel like veteran player, the mental side of it. Obviously, you feel like is going to work itself out, and then you have obviously Jared Jones over at first, and it really, I don't want to get into because Glenn, I think it would be ill-advised of us to try to think of like a starting nine on opening day at this point. I mean, who knows what it's going to look like? But when you go to
I
the
did that
outfield,
exercise, and I'm that's why I was saying a little earlier, like you could probably put a bunch of red marks in it already.
say, nah, yeah,
Yeah.
you could go and grade it and mark it up. Outfield, I mean, Glenn, do you want to list the 8 guys? I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
I'll
it's
list them.
just list the 8 guys and let's talk about them because it's
I'll run
just
through them. So
yeah.
the 8 guys that I think you could potentially see in the outfield in some combination on opening weekend, you're gonna have Chris Stanfield, you're gonna have Derek Curiel, the freshman, you're gonna have Jake Brown, Ashton Larson, you're gonna have potentially a Mick Paul, Ethan Fry. Um, what does that get us to? Like five or six?
That's
Is there
6, I think. Yeah, 6, yeah.
Dalton Beck, I think, could probably play a little bit of outfield for you as well as a kind of a power, a power swinger guy that could maybe, give you some things in one of the corner outfield spots. And I think that's pretty much it. Those are maybe the 7. Maybe it's 7, not 8. Josh Pearson, of course. How could I
Yeah,
miss Josh
how
Pearson?
could you forget
That
about
gets you
the
to 8.
constant? Yeah.
So those are kind of the 8, and honestly, like there is enough versatility in all their games, and there is enough like righty lefty
Mhm.
situation in all of their games that they could go in any number of directions here. And
Yeah.
you mentioned Stanfield here. I was not as high on Stanfield in the fall. I just didn't see a whole lot of him in the scrimmages that I went to that, showed me that he was going to be a surefire starter. But since he's gotten back this spring, everything that I've heard and seen, and that you've obviously seen as well, if he's swinging the bat and putting the ball in play, that speed is going to be very tough to take off the field. And I think that's what LSU
Yeah.
was hoping a guy like Paxton Kling could have been for them last year. But the bat just never found that consistency with Paxton. Maybe they can find that with Stanfield here, a guy who's played a lot over his couple years at Auburn and has some SEC experience. I think if you rolled him out there with, a Josh Pearson and whether it's Jake Brown, Ashton Larson, Derek Curiel, I think those are kind of maybe the most athletic 5 that you have that you could roll out and potentially be really solid defensively as well as swinging the bat. So
Yeah.
those are kind of the names, but like I mean, we go out there today for the scrimmage. It could be 3 different guys. It could be Dalton Beck. It could be, they could be wanting to put their power hitters in there with Beck and with Jake Brown
Mhm.
and those guys. So like I think there's a bunch of different ways this can go in the outfield. Curious, what do you think? What's kind of the most, if you had to pick like a core outfield, an outfield that you think
Mm.
works speed wise, defense wise, hitting wise? Like, is there any that kind of just you feel like is going to be LSU's way to have the most success this year?
Okay, I'm going to cheat here because I was talking Koki Riley, who obviously works for the Advocate and covers baseball. He and I were kind of just talking about this back and forth, and then the consensus we came on is I cannot see a scenario where Josh Pearson's not in the lineup. Like, I mean, this is a guy who's batting in the 4 hole down the stretch last year. And just Josh Pearson to me is just going to be a guy that he might hit like 250, 260, but the clutch hits that he has in big moments is just in the experience that's invaluable to this roster. So I feel like Pearson is going to be in there. After that, Glenn, I mean, I'll say this with the 2 power guys that you mentioned, Ethan Fry being in that category too. I think that they might find more opportunities in a DH role, just because, or off the bench late offensive opportunities, because I feel like defensively there with Curiel, I mean, all reports is this guy's super smooth, and just what he can do makes the I put this on our board. He makes the easy plays look easy and the tougher plays look routine, and that's a pretty good quality for a young player to have. So with Curiel, I feel like that's a guy that, defensively is probably a little bit ahead of those other guys. That's going to play a role. And then Stanfield with his level of SEC expertise, and then Jake Brown as well. I'm going to just throw out a guess, and like you say, Glenn, get ready to clip this and say Bryce was a moron. When we suit up and we see them play against Purdue Fort Wayne here in a couple weeks. I'm going to go Stanfield, Brown, and Pearson. I think that could be the three, and then Saturday we could see something completely different. Sunday we could see something completely different. But I think if I had to put money on it right now, I could see Stanfield in center, maybe Brown in left or right, and then Pearson in left or right. And then you could just kind of go different places with that. But
yeah,
you got the two veterans and then a guy that is in year 2 in the program.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense for opening day. For me, I think in that scenario, Brown would probably be in right, and I think Pearson would probably be in left. I think Pearson has a lot of experience in left. And then Stanfield in center would make a lot of sense. But I mean, look, I also, then you got to take Curiel out, and like I think Curiel is going to be a huge piece to this team. Like, I would probably lean Curiel in center, Stanfield in right. No, Stanfield in left, and then Josh Pearson in right. Like I think there's going to be, and then you got to take Jake Brown. Maybe take Jake Brown and put him as the DH. Like I think that might be the place you start. Like I mean, there's just so many different ways this can go, and we got to wait and see if Stanfield can hold up with the bat. And I think if Stanfield's bat is still kind of a little bit iffy, then maybe you can talk me into Jake Brown or Ashton Larson or one of those guys, but. Larson's another guy. Like,
he
was an everyday player last year for them as a true freshman and performed well early. I know he kind of hit a slump late in the season and didn't perform like he wanted to, but I think he also bounced back in the Cape Cod League and had a really nice summer last year, and I think he did okay in the fall. I didn't really notice him doing a whole ton, but he's another smooth swing, like another smooth batter. And he's not like the fastest outfielder that you could possibly have out there, but he's going to factor into this thing as well if he can swing the bat the way that he showed at the very early part of his career last year. So outfield's going to be very interesting. Catcher's going to be interesting. And then third base, what they do with third base, I think is going to be, those are the positions in the field that, feel up for grabs and very much not settled at this point.
Yeah. All right, Glenn, I wanted to end the pod because we talked a lot of, positions and players. I wanted to have a little fun with it here. What is a series that, you're just really excited to see? Like who I mean, obviously there's some really good ones this year. I mean, Tennessee coming to town there that last week of April. You obviously have Arkansas coming to town as well. Well, I mean, maybe I took yours. What is a game or two, or maybe one or two opponents you're really excited to see how they match up?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tennessee for me, that's going to be probably your most ruckus atmosphere, your most intense series of the entire season.
Past two national champs.
That's going to be really, really fun in late April to kind of dive into. But I honestly think, when you go. I mean, this is how LSU's schedule finishes next year or this year. They have Bama at home, Tennessee at home, and then they go to Texas A&M, Texas A&M is the number 1 team in the country. Like that is a grueling 9-game stretch there of SEC play. That's going to be, and it could dictate whether LSU is at the top of the conference, the middle of the conference, or just fighting to still hang on to an NCAA tournament bid. Like there's that final 3-series stretch there is going to be huge. And I think for me, A&M's the team right now that everyone's on. A&M right now is like kind of that number 1 team in the country. I think we got to see kind of what the coaching staff is like and how they adjust with having that loaded roster kind of just inherited or I guess promoted. I mean, the guy was promoted from within the program, but very curious to see kind of how that works out. And I think that series could be another interesting one because it's on the road too. I mean, like
Yeah.
you really find out a lot about your team on the road, and by that point, LSU will be seasoned. They will have had a lot of games under their belt to really figure out who this team is. So that final 9-game stretch there with Alabama, Tennessee, and then A&M. Those are the three that I think stick out to me as a kind of the most important stretch of the year.
Yeah, and then you follow that up with, I mean, they come home on May the 4th after playing A&M. You got the midweek against Grambling, and then you welcome Arkansas into the box.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. You
yeah,
see, I didn't even scroll all the way down
yeah,
that far.
and
Yeah.
then you go the very next weekend to Columbia, South Carolina, which so it's. I mean, the SEC's a gauntlet, Glenn. I mean, like,
Yeah.
just some of that, but I do like that. That's kind of where I was cheating towards, honestly, with you right there. Like, you go Alabama, Tennessee, A&M, and I'll throw Arkansas. Those 4 series in a row. I don't want to say it could make or break, but it could, like you said, it could determine are you playing on the first day of the SEC tournament, or you got a little rest?
Are you hosting a regional? Are you hosting a super regional?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's all resume building stuff right there,
Yeah.
and they don't get any harder than those 4 or 5 series there to end the year. So,
Yeah,
I know it's an easy answer. It's the SEC in terms of non-conference play. I
that
think
Dallas
this series.
Baptist could be fun.
Yeah,
Top
that's what I was about
matchup.
to say.
Yeah.
The Dallas Baptist game could be really interesting. I always like playing those in-state schools. You know, the Nichols of the world. There's always one in-state team that gives you a good midweek battle that you have to kind of fight through. They play Xavier of Ohio in the middle of March as well. Like, that could be a fun, interesting game right before the start of SEC play. So there's a lot of little nugget games, I guess, throughout the season that always seem to pop up and give LSU a good test.
Yeah, one that I'm circling is you come back from Austin, Texas on March the 23rd, and that upcoming Thursday you start a home series against Mississippi State. Sandwiched in between, you're facing UL.
Yeah.
So I mean that's on that Tuesday night. So that's going to be one where, and look, I mean, if you've been an LSU baseball fan long enough, you know that UL's pretty dang good baseball team year in, year out. Like they're pretty good. So that's gonna be a fun one. And I think the way that one's sandwiched in between on the road at Texas and home against Mississippi State, especially as we know the SEC likes to play those Thursday, Friday, Saturday series, and you got to play it on a Tuesday. Very interested to see how the pitching shakes out for that Tuesday, that midweek game. So should be a lot of fun, man. We are just we're not too far away from the start of the season. I cannot wait for college baseball to be there. And if you're on the boards, you follow me on social media. So I brought my little helper out there on Saturday, and the daughter, 7 months old, had a great time enjoying the sights and sounds of Alex Box. And you and I were talking beforehand, man. It's about time that we got a little sunshine in baseball. Look, the snow was cool, Glenn. I'm not from the north. You're not from the north. I'm good for like 3 days of it. 3 days of it, and let's move on. Let's get back to what we like and getting ready for baseball season.
Absolutely, that was a great experience last week, but I'm good on that for another 30 years. I don't need that again.
I'm good. I don't need that in my life anymore. I love it. LSU baseball right around the corner. Make sure you stay tuned to Go 24/7 for all the latest news and updates regarding your Tigers, whether it's on the diamond, on the gridiron, or on the hardwood as well. And I did want to give you a shout out. I'm going to go hand up. My fault situation. I told the wife on Saturday night, I said, man, I really want to watch this Tennessee Auburn game. Like, that was the marquee matchup. College game day had been there on the hardwood. It got delayed because the game before went long. And so I said, all right, I'll watch. I know Glen's watching, but I'll flip it over. Trades Green is a freak on the court. And LSU basketball with Corey Chess might have found something. And I just want to get your quick opinion here. And this is a baseball pod today. Is it enough, Glen, for you to say, okay, if you can play consistently like that against the number 4 team in the country for over 40 minutes, they might be able to pick off an opponent or two down the stretch and look, make hoop season a little more interesting than it has been so far throughout the SEC slate.
Yeah, I think there was an initial worry here that once they lost their first couple of games and the way that they did, they were not very competitive in the second halves of a couple of those games, that this could get really, really out of hand. I think the week that they had now, where it was a week between games, it was like a Saturday to Saturday kind of deal, and they were able to work on a lot of different things, and I think that was obviously really good for Trades to get kind of acclimated with the team, and probably why you saw him playing I think 9 or 10, 11 minutes in that game. I would expect him to continue to kind of see that 10 to 15-minute range in the short term, and maybe he does enough to where he can continue to increase his role as conference play moves along. So he's definitely an interesting piece to throw into the mix here at this point in the season. We'll see how they do against Auburn tomorrow. I don't want to put stock in just one really solid performance overall, especially when they did end up losing, and it was because of a lot of the same issues that they've had throughout the entirety of their season. They still can't shoot the three ball all that efficiently. Alabama got some offensive rebounds in the second half. They got to the free throw line a lot. So there's still some areas here where this team is not going to be perfect, and they're not going to win some of these games. But I do think that if they can continue to build on what they did against Alabama, which was be physical and hustle and get loose balls, create turnovers, there will be opportunities to win games against, Georgia, Texas, Arkansas again. They got Oklahoma. These are all turning into winnable games. They got South Carolina at home. I mean, these are areas where LSU, I think, could find some success on a certain night and have a winning effort. So maybe not the 2 or 3 win team that we were fearing for a little bit. Maybe they get closer to 6 or 7, but still a lot of work to be done there to kind of get this program back to where it was several years ago and consistently competing at the top of the conference.
And also, I want to say this: the conference is vastly different than when Will Wade is them, and we need to understand that. Auburn's coming in, and Glenn, I'm not trying to be any way about it. Like, I've watched that Auburn team a lot this year. That is that is an unreal basketball team. Like, they are very good, very deep, and if you get another performance like you did against Alabama on the road, and you play competitively for 38 minutes, and maybe it gets away from the last 2 minutes or so. I understand Matt McMahon doesn't want moral victories, but it's just there's a gap. There's just a gap between the talent level and it's real. You have to acknowledge it, and maybe you can pick up on it. If they were to beat Auburn somehow on Wednesday night, Glenn, that'd be a program altering type of win. Like,
it'd be one of the biggest upsets in the program's history for sure. I mean, when you just look at LSU being unranked and several games below 500, Auburn coming in as the number 1 team in the country. If they found a way to win that game, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, we're going to talk with Matt McMahon here in a few hours, and we'll get a kind of better sense of kind of where LSU's headspace is at going into this game. But they really don't have anything to lose right now. I mean, they are not really competing for anything right now. They just got to play for pride and play for the school and play for each other. And we'll see if that it results in another performance where they're consistent enough to compete. And if not, then it's going to be a 35-point blowout if they have some of the same issues that they had earlier in conference play that continue to be a major problem.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. That's a 6 p.m. local time tip-off on Wednesday night, Auburn and LSU, and hopefully it'll be a good environment, we'll see as well. So, Glen West, that's who he is. My name's Bryce, and we appreciate you so much for tuning in over, whether it's on YouTube or any of those podcast platforms. Make sure you follow us, continue to climb those numbers. We'll be having some great content. Baseball, obviously, continuing to ramp up. I'll be over in Mobile starting on Wednesday, where we'll have some video interviews with a bunch of LSU Tigers being represented at the Senior Bowl. Should be fun time to see those guys compete and get a chance to talk with them one more time before they officially begin their NFL and professional journeys in football. So, my name is Bryce Koon. That's Glen West. We appreciate you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time here on the Go 24/7 podcast.